Hello, settle in, get comfortable, and prepare for sleep. Tonight's lecture will take you far beyond the boundaries of our planet into the cold abyss of space where a recent discovery was made. A discovery that could change everything we know. Imagine an object so profoundly perfect that nature itself, bound by all its laws, could never have created it. An ideal sphere, smooth on an atomic level, utterly flawless, without a single scratch or imperfection. Scientists have found exactly that. This finding challenges not only our place in the universe, but the very foundations of physics as we understand it. What is it? A message? An artifact from an ancient civilization? Or perhaps something our minds are simply not yet equipped to comprehend? Let us dive together into this incredible mystery. Are you ready to uncover the truth hidden in deep space? Perhaps the answer will come to you, even as you sleep. Before we discuss the sphere itself, let's establish the necessary context. For centuries, humanity has gazed into the night sky, first with the naked eye, then through simple telescopes, and now with incredibly sophisticated observatories capable of peering into the universe's most distant corners. One primary goal of these searches has always been to answer a simple question. Are we alone? Projects like SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, have spent decades listening to the cosmos, hoping to catch a meaningful signal. Yet for all these years, the universe has remained silent. We found planets, stars, galaxies, nebulae, all of them adhering strictly to the laws of physics we know. Objects in space are always imperfect. Planets bulge at the equator due to rotation. Stars have heterogeneous structures. Asteroids and comets tumble with bizarre, irregular shapes. Even objects that appear smooth, like neutron stars, possess microscopic mountains and irregularities. Perfection is a mathematical abstraction. It does not exist in our chaotic, real world. That is why, when the initial data appeared on the monitors at the Mauna Kea Observatory, no one could believe their eyes. The automated data analysis system flagged the object as an artifact or a calibration error. But it was no error. So, it all began on a quiet Hawaiian night. A new generation telescope, specifically designed for mapping dark matter, was conducting its routine scan of deep space. Its mission is to measure the faintest distortions in light from distant galaxies, distortions caused by the gravity of invisible substance. It's a painstaking effort, requiring the analysis of petabytes of data. And then, in one specific sector, the program detected an anomaly that simply didn't fit any existing model. It wasn't a gravitational lens caused by a galaxy cluster, nor was it interference from a passing satellite. The data suggested the presence of a small, yet perfectly symmetrical object. The initial reaction from the team of astrophysicists, led by Dr. Evelyn Reed, was sheer skepticism. In astronomy, 99% of all incredible discoveries turn out to be equipment malfunctions, atmospheric distortions, or simply misinterpretations of the data. The team spent several weeks double-checking. They recalibrated every sensor, cross-referenced data from neighboring telescopes, and sifted through archival images of that region of the sky. Nothing, no error could be found, yet the object remained exactly where it was. It wasn't moving, at least not perceptibly to Earth-based instruments, and it emitted nothing except the reflected light of distant stars. Its gravitational influence was minimal, but that very influence was what allowed them to notice it. It warped space-time around itself with absolute, perfect symmetry. Only a body with a flawless spherical shape and uniform density could achieve this. Dr. Reed, a woman with 30 years of experience in observational astronomy, included a sentence in her final report that would later be cited by every major scientific publication. We have encountered an object whose parameters defy the principle of natural formation. It was an incredibly cautious, yet simultaneously shocking statement. It implied only one thing. Whatever they were looking at was, most likely, artificially created. But by whom? And how? To gather more data, the team decided to focus the world's most powerful radio telescopes on that specific region of the sky. The phase of active observation had begun. The situation grew even more bizarre when the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array, ALMA, was brought online for observations. ALMA is capable of producing images with incredible resolution by analyzing the radio waves emitted by deep space objects. Scientists had hoped to discern some surface details, perhaps craters from micrometeorites, or variations in temperature or chemical composition. Instead, the sphere remained utterly flawless. Picture this: a perfectly black orb that neither absorbs nor emits visible light, yet its outline could be precisely tracked due to the way it distorted the background radiation. ALMA data established the object's diameter at roughly 300 meters, about the size of a small asteroid. Crucially, however, no natural asteroid can achieve perfect sphericity. An asteroid's gravitational forces are far too weak to pull itself into a perfect sphere, and continuous bombardment by space debris would inevitably leave its surface pocked and uneven. This sphere, by contrast, appeared smooth down to the atomic level. Its deviation from perfect sphericity was measured at less than 1/1,000,000%. To put that in perspective, the most precise spheres ever engineered by humans are the silicon orbs created for the Avogadro project, used to redefine the kilogram. Even those exhibit microscopic irregularities visible under an electron microscope. Yet this object, spanning the length of 3 football fields, was more mathematically perfect. From the standpoint of thermodynamics and material science, this degree of perfection was physically impossible. Every known natural process, be it crystallization or gravitational accretion, inherently leaves behind defects and inhomogeneities. The sphere's absolute flawlessness suggested a technology capable of manipulating matter at the subatomic scale, or perhaps one utilizing materials and physical principles we have yet to even conceive of. It was at this point that the word artifact first surfaced within the scientific community. Not merely an anomaly, but specifically an artifact, an object demonstrably of artificial origin. This was a premise so radical that many scientists initially refused to entertain it. Yet, the alternative explanations that surfaced were arguably even more fantastic. Could it be an unknown type of quark star? Perhaps a stable wormhole with a perfectly spherical event horizon? Every single one of these physical hypotheses swiftly crumbled when confronted with the observed data. The subsequent phase involved spectral analysis. This technique is crucial for determining an object's chemical composition. By studying the spectrum of the light it reflects, every chemical element absorbs and emits light at specific wavelengths, leaving unique spectral fingerprints. Scientists pointed their most sensitive spectrographs directly at the sphere, anticipating clear absorption lines for standard asteroidal elements: iron, nickel, and silicon. The data returned by the James Webb Space Telescope, however, delivered the final crushing blow. The resulting spectrum was blank, perfectly flat. The object reflected all wavelengths of light with absolute uniformity, neither absorbing nor distorting any part of the electromagnetic radiation. This signature is known as a perfect gray body, a purely theoretical construct, non-existent in nature. Every single real material possesses specific spectral features. This flat, featureless spectrum suggested two possibilities. Either the sphere's surface was composed of an unknown metamaterial engineered to perfectly reflect the entire electromagnetic spectrum, or it was coated with something designed to completely mask its true composition. It resembled stealth technology on a cosmic scale, yet its goal wasn't merely concealment. The object was clearly visible. Instead, its purpose was to prevent the disclosure of any information about itself. This was a deliberate act of data suppression. This unique characteristic definitively eliminated all natural hypotheses. No known combination of elements or compounds could possibly yield this result. Scientists were left at an absolute impasse. They were faced with an object that defied the laws of celestial mechanics, violated the principles of material science, and broke the fundamental rules of spectroscopy. It simply hung in space, silent, perfect, and seemingly mocking every human attempt to comprehend it. Behind closed doors, in the inner corridors of NASA and the European Space Agency, emergency meetings began. The issue had instantaneously shifted from a purely scientific puzzle to a matter of national and arguably planetary security. The immediate questions were terrifying. What should they do with this knowledge? Should they inform the world? And perhaps most critically, what if this object was not merely a passive observer? Even as governments debated their response, the scientific work pressed on. If we couldn't figure out the sphere's composition, maybe we could at least determine its origin and destination. Astrometrists, experts in measuring the position and movement of celestial bodies, got straight to work. They used months of gathered data to calculate the object's trajectory with the highest possible precision. And once again, they encountered a massive surprise. The sphere was not moving along the predictable elliptical orbit around the galactic center, as all stars and planets do. It was virtually motionless relative to the so-called rest frame, the absolute frame of reference linked to the cosmic microwave background radiation left over from the Big Bang. Imagine the entire Milky Way galaxy hurtling through space at nearly 600 kilometers per second. Now picture this object simply hanging motionless as the entire galaxy streams past it. It was like dropping an anchor in the ocean of space-time. To maintain this state, the object would either need infinite mass, which gravitational readings disproved, or it would have to constantly correct its position using some propulsion system to counteract the galaxy's enormous gravitational pull. But no drive system was detected. There were no plasma emissions, no telltale gravitational waves, or any other signs of active operation. It appeared as if the object was simply ignoring the law of universal gravitation. This singular characteristic sparked the boldest and most terrifying theory yet. What if the sphere wasn't just an object in space, but rather an anchor, a stabilizer linked to other dimensions, or perhaps to the very fabric of space-time itself? Some theoretical physicists proposed it might be a projection or interface of a far more complex, multi-dimensional structure. This would explain its perfect form, its strange surface properties, and its anomalous movement. It wasn't adhering to our laws of physics because it didn't entirely belong to our three-dimensional world. This concept was undoubtedly on the border of science fiction, yet bizarrely, it offered the best explanation for the entirety of the accumulated data. Humanity was no longer facing a mere artifact, but something that fundamentally redefined our perception of reality. What was perhaps most unsettling was the sphere's complete lack of activity. It emitted no signals, failed to respond to our attempts to ping it using powerful radio transmitters, and remained utterly inert. It was a silence, not a void, but of calculated patience, a silence of waiting. Project SETI immediately dedicated all available resources to the object. Dozens of radio telescopes globally, from Arecibo to China's Vast, listened to the sphere around the clock, scanning every possible frequency. They searched for everything from simple repeating pulses to complex modulated signals. The result was zero. The object was radio silent. This silence could be interpreted in several ways. Pessimists theorized it was merely an abandoned artifact, a derelict shell left behind by a long-vanished civilization. Perhaps it was some kind of cosmic buoy or monument that had long since fulfilled its purpose. Optimists hypothesized that we simply didn't know how to listen. Maybe the sphere's builders used something other than electromagnetic waves for communication, gravitational waves, neutrinos, or perhaps even exotic particles that our current science has yet to discover. There was a third, far more disturbing possibility. What if the sphere was an observation probe, deliberately masking its presence to study us without influencing our development? This idea, known as the zoo hypothesis, suggests that highly advanced civilizations observe us much like we observe animals in a nature preserve, without interference. The perfectly smooth, featureless surface, and the complete lack of movement. It all perfectly matched the profile of an ideal observation post. This thought provoked existential dread. All of humanity, all our history, our wars, art and science, it could all merely be an object of study for an invisible and incomprehensible observer. Every action we take, every rocket launch, every broadcast, all of it potentially being recorded and analyzed. This realization forced many politicians and military leaders to view the situation from an entirely different perspective. Now, let's discuss what this sphere might actually be made of. Since spectral analysis failed to yield any results, scientists had to resort to purely theoretical modeling. They attempted to hypothesize what kind of material could possess such extreme properties. perfect reflectivity, incredible durability, enough to withstand micrometeoroid bombardment for millions, perhaps billions of years, while still remaining light enough that the object's total mass wouldn't be excessive. Standard materials like titanium or tungsten were immediately ruled out. They simply couldn't provide the necessary smoothness or reflectivity. Composite materials, such as carbon fiber, were also poor candidates, and their complex internal structure would have been visible during analysis. Theoretical physicists then turned to the most exotic frontiers of science. One leading hypothesis suggested the sphere was composed of programmable matter. This is a hypothetical material made of microscopic robots or atoms capable of changing their properties and position on command. Such matter could self-repair any micrometeoroid damage, maintaining a perfectly uniform surface. It could also be engineered to reflect the entire spectrum of electromagnetic radiation, which would fully explain the null spectral signature. Another, even more fantastical theory proposed that the sphere was made of neutronium, a hypothetical substance consisting only of neutrons. Typically, neutronium exists solely under the immense pressure found inside neutron star cores. But what if there was a way to stabilize it under standard conditions? Such a material would be incredibly dense and smooth. However, this theory poorly aligned with the object's measured mass. It appeared far too light for neutronium. The most elegant, and perhaps the most terrifying, hypothesis posited that the sphere's surface was not material in the conventional sense at all, but a localized field, a stable bubble of warped space-time. This would represent the absolute pinnacle of engineering, creating an object shielded by the very fabric of reality itself. Such a field could deflect all matter and radiation, rendering the object virtually invulnerable and invisible to standard analysis. Whichever theory proves correct, it points to a level of technology that precedes ours by tens of thousands, if not millions, of years. This was not merely the product of another civilization. It was the work of a civilization that had mastered the fundamental laws of the universe. While scientists were busy theorizing, world governments found themselves grappling with an unprecedented dilemma. A complete information lockdown was simply impossible. Far too many people were involved in the observations, and far too much data was circulating across unsecure networks. The critical question wasn't if the public would find out, but how the news should be delivered. Under the auspices of the UN, a special international commission was hastily assembled. Its members included not only scientists and policymakers, but also philosophers, sociologists, and key religious leaders. Their mandate was to devise a unified strategy for disclosure. The central fear revolved around mass panic and subsequent societal destabilization. How exactly would humanity react upon discovering we are not alone in the cosmos, and realizing that they possess technology seemingly indistinguishable from magic or even divinity? What would the fallout be for the world's major religions, many of which place humanity squarely at the center of creation? How would this revelation affect the global economy and the delicate geopolitical balance? Imagine if just one nation attempted to unilaterally establish contact, or worse, exhibit aggression toward the object. Such an act carried the potential for catastrophic planet-wide consequences. The Commission operated under the tightest shroud of secrecy. They developed dozens of scenarios, everything from outright denial to a carefully phased, controlled release of information to the public. They even considered creating elaborate cover stories, perhaps classifying the object as a unique, albeit natural, phenomenon, just to buy them time. This was, undeniably, playing with fire. On one hand, continuing the deception would inevitably fuel conspiracy theories and erode public trust the moment the truth leaked out. On the other, premature disclosure risked sparking outright chaos. This entire situation exposed humanity's profound lack of preparedness for such a reality. We were akin to ants discovering a smartphone lying on top of their hill. We could see it. We could touch it. But we were completely unable to grasp what it was, how it functioned, or the intentions of whoever left it behind. The search for the sphere's potential historical footprint became one of the most compelling avenues of research. If it had occupied that specific point in space for an extended period, surely someone must have noticed it before, even if they couldn't correctly interpret what they were seeing. Astronomers immediately began digging through the archives of every major observatory, spanning the last 100 years. They meticulously examined old photographic plates and digital images, searching for the slightest hint of gravitational lensing or a starlight occlusion in that specific celestial sector. This was a monumental, painstaking task, truly searching for a needle in a haystack. And much to everyone's astonishment, they found the needle. Several photographs, taken by the Palomar Observatory back in 1953, contained a tiny, almost imperceptible anomaly. At the time, it had been dismissed as a photographic emulsion defect. But modern digital analysis confirmed it without a doubt. It was the sphere. It was located in the exact same position. This meant the object had been present in our galaxy for at least 70 years, and very likely much, much longer. This discovery had two critical implications. First, it confirmed the sphere was not a recent arrival. It was a permanent feature of our local galactic environment. Second, it made the object even more enigmatic. If this was indeed an observation probe, why had it remained stationary for so long? What kind of data requires decades or even centuries to collect? Perhaps it wasn't concerned with short-term events, like human wars and revolutions, but rather slow, systemic processes. The evolution of the biosphere, the planet's geological shifts, or even the sun's own life cycle. This suggested a perspective focused not on humanity, but on Earth as a complete system, operating on timescales we can barely comprehend. Some researchers pushed the boundaries of speculation even further. They began scouring ancient myths and historical records, searching for references to strange, stationary stars or celestial omens. While this was pure conjecture, the mere thought that our ancestors might have observed the exact same object, perhaps worshiping it as a deity or seeing it as an omen, electrified the imagination. The sphere was transforming from a simple scientific object into something much grander, a silent witness to the entirety of human history. Eventually, it became clear that passive observation from Earth simply wasn't enough. To truly grasp the nature of the sphere, We had to get closer. Deep within NASA, Roscosmos, and the China National Space Administration, CNSA, planning began for an ambitious interplanetary mission targeting the object codenamed the Eye. This was the most ambitious space project in human history. The task was incredibly complex. Firstly, they had to create a vessel capable of traversing the enormous distance and entering orbit around the sphere without disturbing it. Secondly, this probe needed to be equipped with a comprehensive suite of instruments capable of analyzing the object up close. Everything from subsurface scanning radar to mass spectrometers designed to analyze individual atoms, should they be able to capture any. Thirdly, and most critically, the mission had to be prepared for any and all contingencies. What if the sphere reacted to the probe's approach? What if it possessed a defensive system? Protocols were developed for every conceivable scenario, including a first contact protocol and an emergency self-destruct mechanism for the probe, designed to ensure that hostile technology wouldn't fall into the hands of a potential adversary. The development of the Eye mission became a powerful catalyst for international cooperation. Nations that had competed in space for decades were now forced to combine their efforts. The best engineers, programmers, and scientists from around the globe worked side by side, realizing that the future of all humanity was at stake. The sheer act of preparing for such a mission was already changing the world. It compelled humanity to think on a planetary scale, to see themselves not as representatives of individual nations, but as a single species facing the great unknown. Even remaining entirely passive, the sphere had already begun to transform us. It became a powerful catalyst, accelerating both our technological and, potentially, our social progress. Alongside the space mission's development, a genuine revolution erupted in theoretical physics. The sphere's enigma forced scientists to reconsider the most fundamental concepts of reality: the standard model of particle physics, string theory, loop quantum gravity. All these established frameworks were severely tested in an attempt to explain the properties of the Eye. Dozens of bold new hypotheses emerged. One of them, dubbed the subspatial anchor theory, proposed that the sphere was a contact point between our three-dimensional brain, our universe, and a multi-dimensional hyperspace. This theory suggested the object had no mass in the conventional sense. Instead, its inertia was dictated by its connection to these higher dimensions, which neatly explained its absolute immobility. Its surface was not matter, but rather the boundary layer separating two distinct physical realities. This theory, despite sounding like pure science fiction, offered one key prediction that could actually be tested. If the sphere was indeed a window to another dimension, then microscopic fluctuations in fundamental constants, such as the speed of light or Planck's constant, should be observable nearby. Detecting such fluctuations from Earth was impossible, but the Eye mission probe would be capable of doing so. Another line of thought focused on the concept of information. Some physicists hypothesized that the sphere wasn't a physical object at all, but a sort of cosmic hard drive, a repository of information recorded at unbelievable density. Perhaps it was a library of a long-vanished civilization, containing their history, science, and art. Or even more intriguingly, it could be a complete archive of the universe itself. A kind of source code for reality. Under this hypothesis, the perfect surface and the absence of spectral lines were mechanisms designed to protect the information from degradation caused by cosmic radiation and the passage of time. The object was engineered to last forever, or at least until the heat death of the universe. This concept immediately transformed the I mission from exploratory research into cosmic archaeology. The goal was no longer merely to study the object, but to attempt to read it, to crack the code, and gain access to knowledge that could surpass everything humanity had accumulated throughout its history. The information leak finally happened. Predictably, it didn't come through official channels, but instead via a junior researcher at one of the observatories who tipped off his journalist friend. The news instantly captivated global media. It started with cautious articles in scientific journals, quickly escalating to sensational tabloid headlines. Alien craft spotted on the edge of the solar system, and scientists conceal contact with extraterrestrials. Governments were forced to issue official statements. They confirmed the object's existence, but immediately went into damage control, attempting to downplay the situation by labeling it a unique astronomical anomaly and emphasizing the lack of evidence regarding artificial origin or hostile intent. But it was already too late. Society plunged into a volatile state, a mixture of excitement, fear, and deep uncertainty. Reactions varied wildly. Some embraced the news with zealous enthusiasm, viewing the sphere as a promise of a brilliant new future where humanity would finally join the galactic community. New cults rapidly formed, treating the celestial sphere as a divine messenger. Others, however, descended into outright panic. They saw the object as a clear threat, a harbinger of invasion or the apocalypse. Stock markets went into a tailspin. Conspiracy theories exploded overnight. Rumors abounded that governments had been colluding with the aliens for decades, and the sphere was merely the tip of the iceberg. This event became a profound test for human civilization. It exposed our deep vulnerability in the face of the unknown, revealing just how thin the veneer of our daily routine is, and how easily something truly extraordinary can shatter it. The sphere served as a global psychological litmus test, and whether humanity could pass it remained uncertain. It forced every person on Earth to confront the same fundamental questions. Who are we? What is our place in this vast, incomprehensible cosmos? And are we truly ready for the answer? Despite the flurry of external activity, the debates within the scientific community raged on. One of the central questions revolved around the sphere's age. How long had it actually been drifting through space? Direct attempts to date the object via its surface proved useless. It was perfectly pristine, utterly devoid of craters. Therefore, scientists had to resort to indirect methods of age estimation. If the sphere was indeed an artifact, its creators must have achieved an almost unimaginably high level of technological sophistication, based on the so-called Kardashev scale, which classifies civilizations by their energy usage, they would have to be at least a type 2, a society capable of harnessing the total energy output of its home star, or perhaps even a type 3, controlling the energy of an entire galaxy. To reach that level of development, a civilization requires millions, if not hundreds of millions, of years of stable evolution. Our own Milky Way galaxy has existed for roughly 13.5 billion years. The first generation of stars rich in heavy elements, those crucial for life to emerge, appeared approximately 10 to 11 billion years ago. This means any hypothetical civilization had an immense amount of time to emerge, develop, and construct an object like the sphere. It's highly possible it was built before life had even taken hold on Earth. The sheer scope of this idea was staggering. We might be observing the creation of a species that vanished billions of years before humanity ever existed. This inevitably brought up the concept of the Great Filter, the hypothetical barrier that prevents civilizations from achieving high development levels and subsequently colonizing the galaxy. Could the sphere be a monument left by a civilization that successfully passed the filter? Or, conversely, was the sphere the filter itself? Some researchers floated a truly terrifying hypothesis that the sphere is a kind of guardian programmed to eliminate any civilization that crosses a specific technological threshold and begins to pose a threat to the rest of the galaxy. They theorized that its passivity is merely an illusion and it could activate at any moment. While this theory was obviously unprovable, it certainly mandated extreme caution regarding any active interaction with the object. Let's take a closer look at how the sphere interacts with its immediate environment. Despite its apparent stillness, it is fundamentally impossible to completely isolate it from the cosmos. It is under constant bombardment, pummeled by solar wind particles, cosmic rays, and micrometeorites. So, how does it manage to maintain its pristine, perfect surface? Physicists have modeled several possible defense mechanisms. The first is an active system. The surface of the sphere could be covered in a network of nanoscopic sensors that track incoming projectiles. Upon detecting a threat, the system could instantly generate a localized force field, electromagnetic or gravitational, to deflect the particle. This would require incredible reaction speed and immense computational power, but for a Type 2 or Type 3 civilization, such capabilities would be trivial. The second mechanism is passive, yet no less sophisticated. The surface might possess a property akin to superhydrophobicity, not just against water, but against all matter. This means the atoms on its surface are held in such an energetic state that they repel all other atoms, preventing them from adhering or causing structural damage. It would essentially be the perfect cosmic scale Teflon coating. The third and most exotic option involves manipulating time itself. What if time flows differently near the sphere's surface? For instance, it might be drastically slowed down or even run in reverse at microscopic scales. Any incoming object entering this temporal anomaly would simply be erased from reality before it could cause harm. While this hypothesis sounds utterly insane, it would perfectly explain the object's absolute purity. Whichever of these systems is actually implemented, It undeniably demonstrates total mastery over the laws of physics. The sphere's creators weren't merely building with available materials, they were fabricating the materials themselves, designing properties on demand. They were controlling space, and perhaps even time. This wasn't just an engineering project as we understand it. It was an act of creation, comparable to generating a universe in miniature. Beyond its physical properties, the sphere's mathematical aspects drew immense interest. Its perfect form wasn't merely an engineering triumph, it was the ultimate realization of mathematical abstraction. Mathematically, a sphere is the set of all points equidistant from a central point. It is a perfect Platonic object. Yet in nature, we constantly deal with approximations. Our own planet is a geoid. A drop of water is distorted by surface tension. A star is a churning ball of plasma. The eye was the first observable object in history that perfectly matched its mathematical ideal. This led some scientists and philosophers to see a profound meaning. What if the sphere was not just an object, but a message written in the universal language of mathematics? If you wanted to capture the attention of another intelligent civilization, you wouldn't send them messages in your own language. They wouldn't understand. You wouldn't send images. They could easily be misinterpreted. But you could create an object that demonstrably violates the laws of nature and embodies a fundamental mathematical idea. An ideal sphere is like a giant cosmic declaration of pi carved into the sky. It's a signal that says, we are here. We understand mathematics. We can manipulate matter. It was, in effect, a calling card left in space. This idea sparked an entirely new line of inquiry, the search for other mathematical regularities within the object's data. Scientists began analyzing the minutest fluctuations in its gravitational field and reflected light, looking for hidden patterns, sequences that might form a coded message. Perhaps the sphere's geometry encrypted fundamental physical constants, or even an entire encyclopedia of knowledge. It was a desperate attempt to find meaning in the silence. Humanity gazed upon this perfect mathematical form, just as the ancient Greeks contemplated the harmony of the celestial spheres, searching for a key to understanding the structure of the universe. The core question surrounding the sphere, what were its creators thinking, quickly dominated public and political discourse. If this is an artificial object, what was the purpose of its creation? Why here, of all places? The resulting scenarios, straight out of a great science fiction novel, span the spectrum from overwhelmingly benevolent to utterly terrifying. The benevolent scenario. The sphere is a gift. It could be the Rosetta Stone, needed to decode the laws of the universe, or perhaps a vast library of knowledge, or even a kind of stargate that will allow humanity to travel to other star systems once we achieve the necessary level of development. Its passive nature is seen as a test. Its creators are simply waiting for us to prove our maturity by uniting to study it, rather than attempting to militarize it. The neutral scenario. The sphere has nothing to do with us whatsoever. It might be part of an ancient galactic infrastructure, perhaps a navigational beacon for interstellar travel, or a communication relay operating on principles we don't yet grasp. Our sun and earth are merely accidental neighbors to this structure. It doesn't notice us, just as we don't notice the bacteria on the sidewalk we walk across. Its presence is pure coincidence, carrying neither threat nor promise for humanity. The hostile scenario. This is the most alarming possibility. The sphere could be a weapon, a ticking time bomb of unimaginable power, waiting for its detonation signal. Alternatively, it might be a berserker probe, a self-replicating mechanism programmed to annihilate all organic life, clearing the galaxy for its masters. Its perfect, impenetrable surface is its armor. Its silence is the calm before the storm. Or, as has also been suggested, it could be a guardian, monitoring our development and ready to wipe us out if we become too noisy or dangerous. The sheer lack of data prevents us from choosing among these possibilities, and this profound uncertainty has proven to be the heaviest burden on the human psyche. We are forced to live under the weight of this giant, incomprehensible question mark hanging over our heads. Naturally, the discovery of the sphere instantly reignited interest in UFOs and the ancient astronaut hypothesis. Ufologists and proponents of the paleo-contact theory wasted no time declaring they had been right all along. They argued that the sphere was just one piece of overwhelming evidence of an extraterrestrial presence, a truth that governments had suppressed for decades. Arguments that were once dismissed as purely fringe were now being broadcast across major television networks. They revisited ancient texts, the Indian Vedas, the Bible, interpreting descriptions of vimanas, or fiery chariots, as undeniable evidence of alien spacecraft. They pointed to megalithic structures like the pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge, asserting they could not have been built without highly advanced technology. The sphere had become the undisputed ace up their sleeve. There it is, they proclaimed, tangible proof that can no longer be dismissed. This gave rise to an intriguing social phenomenon. The dividing line between science and pseudoscience began to blur in the public mind. Scientists who had spent decades battling against misinformation found themselves in a difficult position. On one hand, they couldn't deny the existence of an anomalous, seemingly artificial object. On the other, they refused to endorse the evidence-free, often fantastical claims made by ufologists. This tension fueled countless public debates. The scientific community preached caution, emphasizing the need for data collection and strict adherence to the scientific method. Ufologists, however, appealed directly to emotions, intuition, and a profound distrust of official science. This battle for public opinion became as crucial as the mission to study the sphere itself. Whether the rational or the mystical approach prevailed would determine humanity's trajectory in this strange new era, an era ushered in by the discovery of a perfect sphere in the void of space. The sphere introduced one of the most challenging ethical dilemmas we faced, the so-called active search paradox. The core question was simple. Should we actively try to establish contact, or is it safer to maintain passive observation? On the one hand, aggressive actions, like broadcasting a powerful signal toward the sphere, or attempting to touch it with a probe, might yield invaluable information. Such a move could provoke a reaction, finally allowing us to understand what exactly we're dealing with. This was the path championed by bold researchers, those willing to risk everything for knowledge. On the other hand, the risk could be fatal. The renowned Chinese science fiction author Liu Cixin articulated the concept of the dark forest in his seminal novel, The Three-Body Problem. Under this concept, the universe is likened to a dark forest filled with hidden hunters. Every civilization is a hunter, striving to conceal its presence, because once you reveal yourself, you have no way of knowing if the entity that noticed you is friend or foe. The safest bet, therefore, is to strike first and eliminate the potential threat. If this theory holds true, then any active attempt to contact the sphere would be equivalent to screaming in the dark forest, an action guaranteed to attract predators. The sphere's own silence and passivity in this context wasn't seen as merely waiting, but as a calculated, wise precaution. Perhaps its creators also adhere to the dark forest principle and do not wish to draw unwanted attention. This paradox offered no easy answers. It effectively split humanity into two opposing camps. The contactors advocated for immediate action, arguing it would be foolish to squander such an unparalleled opportunity. Meanwhile, the silencers insisted on maximum caution, stressing that the survival of the entire species was at stake. The debate reached the highest levels of the UN, and for the time being, caution prevailed. A resolution was passed dictating that the mission would be strictly observational and would undertake no actions that could, in any way, be interpreted as aggressive. Let's circle back to the design of the OCO probe. Building it required a genuine technological leap forward. Reaching the target sphere in a reasonable time frame meant engineers had to pioneer a completely new propulsion system. Standard chemical rockets were too sluggish. While ion drives offered greater efficiency, they still couldn't provide the necessary velocity. The ultimate solution came in the form of a thermonuclear pulse propulsion system. The underlying concept wasn't new. It traced back to the Project Orion studies of the 1950s. But only now had technology made its realization possible. The OCO's drive was designed to operate by setting off a controlled sequence of thermonuclear micro-explosions. These explosions would propel the craft forward, generating immense acceleration. It was incredibly risky, but it was the only viable technology available. Another massive hurdle was protecting the probe itself. It had to approach an object that potentially possessed defensive systems completely unknown to us. To handle this threat, OCO was equipped with a multi-layered defense system. The outer layer consisted of an ablative material designed to vaporize and dissipate massive amounts of energy, a shield against intense heat or radiation exposure. Beneath that was a composite armor plating, reinforced with carbon nanotubes, engineered to withstand kinetic impacts. Finally, the core of the craft, housing the scientific instruments and computers, was enclosed in a Faraday cage, essential for shielding the sensitive electronics from powerful electromagnetic pulses. The probe's operational system relied on a new generation of artificial intelligence. Give given the vast distances involved, any signal from Earth would take hours to reach the craft. Therefore, the probe had to be completely autonomous, capable of making split-second decisions in emergencies, analyzing the environment, and selecting the optimal course of action entirely on its own. In essence, humanity was launching more than just a piece of hardware into space. We were sending our first robotic ambassador, tasked with acting on behalf of our entire civilization. The cultural impact of the sphere's discovery was profound and multifaceted. It became a powerful, perhaps the most powerful source of inspiration for writers, artists, musicians, and filmmakers. A completely new genre of art emerged, which we can call spherism. Artists attempted to capture its perfect form, its reflections, its inherent mystery. Composers penned symphonies inspired by the silence and majesty of the eye. Cinema burst forth with blockbusters about first contact, missions to the sphere, and its potential influence on the destiny of humanity. The sphere became a universal symbol. For some, it symbolized hope, the ultimate ideal to strive for. For others, it represented the incomprehensible, the fundamental mystery underlying existence. And for still others, it was a symbol of threat, a stark reminder of our fragile existence. It even permeated our language. New idioms appeared, smooth as the sphere, signifying flawless perfection, or silent as the sphere, meaning the keeping of a profound secret. Fashion designers created collections featuring spherical elements. Architects began designing structures in the form of perfect orbs. The sphere fundamentally reshaped our aesthetics. We began to value purity of form, minimalism, and utter perfection. This shift paralleled how the discovery of ancient sculptures during the Renaissance revolutionized European art. Only this time, the inspiration wasn't a forgotten culture from the past, but an incomprehensible one hailing from the depths of space. This cultural renaissance may well have been one of the most significant consequences of the discovery. Even if we never fully grasp the truth behind the sphere, it has already transformed us, forcing us to view the world, art, and ourselves in an entirely new light. It expanded the horizons of our collective imagination, and that, perhaps, was its greatest, albeit unintentional, gift. While the world was gearing up for the I mission, a small, independent group of scientists pursued an alternative project. Their central hypothesis was that the sphere wasn't just a passive object, but rather a node in an intricate cosmic communication network. If that were true, there must be other nodes scattered throughout the universe. They immediately initiated a targeted search for similar structures in distant galaxies. This was a far more demanding task than the initial discovery. They weren't just looking for anomalies anymore. They were searching for specific anomalies, perfectly spherical geometry, zero intrinsic radiation, and an utterly anomalous trajectory. To achieve this, a global telescope network was established, operating as one giant, unified interferometer. Data streams from every continent were synchronized and processed by a dedicated supercomputer in real time. For several years, the search yielded nothing. it increasingly seemed that the eye was a singular, unique phenomenon. But then, while analyzing deep space data from the Andromeda Galaxy, our nearest major galactic neighbor, the system registered something impossible. It found a second identical sphere. It mirrored the first in every quantifiable metric: size, perfect geometry, and spectral signature. The only difference was its location. It resided 2.5 million light years away. This discovery was utterly groundbreaking. If there were two spheres, it wasn't a fluke. It was a system. We were dealing not with an isolated artifact, but with technology deployed on a truly galactic scale. Perhaps every major galaxy had its own guardian or beacon. This realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Terrifying because it hinted at the immense scale of the civilization capable of executing such engineering projects. Exhilarating because if these structures existed in other galaxies, perhaps they weren't specifically directed against us. We might simply be caught up in some grand, incomprehensible process. The scientists immediately began searching for third and fourth spheres in other galaxies. If they could locate them and map their precise coordinates, they might uncover a pattern, a hidden geometric structure in their deployment. That would be the critical next step toward unlocking this universe's greatest mystery. Let's indulge in a little speculation. Imagine the Eye mission successfully reached its objective. The probe settles into orbit around the sphere. What might it see? Perhaps upon closer inspection, the perfectly smooth surface will reveal subtle structures, something like lines, similar to the meridians and parallels on a globe, yet forming a much more intricate pattern. Maybe it's a schematic, a map, or a script written in the language of pure geometry. Or perhaps the surface will prove to be dynamic. It might start shimmering with different colors, displaying images of distant worlds or confusing abstract designs. This could be a form of greeting or a warning. What if the probe attempts to take a sample of the surface material? Maybe the manipulator arm simply passes right through, as if the sphere isn't a solid object at all, but rather a hologram, a mere three-dimensional projection. Or conversely, the surface might be utterly impenetrable, resisting even the toughest diamond composite drill without a scratch. The most fascinating scenario, however, is the sphere's reaction. What if, in response to the probe's approach, a hatch or a portal opens up on its surface? What if it invites us inside? Are we ready for that? What could we possibly find inside? The endless halls of a library containing the cumulative knowledge of the entire galaxy? Or the empty corridors of a ghost ship? Perhaps there is nothing inside except a massive energy source powering the outer shell. Or, the most mind-bending possibility, the interior holds an entire universe, a world complete with its own stars and planets, created either as a work of art or as a refuge from a dying external reality. These scenarios, of course, are purely products of our imagination, inherently limited by our current experience and knowledge. Reality could prove far stranger and more incomprehensible. But it was precisely this boundless unknown that made the Eye mission the most exhilarating adventure in human history. It was a step into absolute darkness. The sheer existence of the sphere compelled us to fundamentally rethink the economic models driving human development. It immediately became clear that any civilization capable of manufacturing such an artifact must have already solved the core problems we currently face: energy shortages, resource depletion, and environmental pollution. They had clearly mastered virtually inexhaustible sources of clean energy, learned to synthesize any material from basic elements, and established truly zero waste production. This realization propelled Earth's scientific and economic sectors to aggressively seek radical breakthroughs. Investments in thermonuclear fusion, nanotechnology, and artificial intelligence research skyrocketed, increasing tenfold. Governments and corporations finally understood that the arms race and the endless fight over fossil fuels were a dead end. True security and prosperity were anchored in technological supremacy and the ability to master matter and energy itself. A new economic paradigm emerged, dubbed the Type 1 economy. Its stated goal was reaching level 1 on the Kardashev scale, achieving complete command over the planet's total energy resources. This mandated a global transition to renewable energy sources, the establishment of fully closed-loop production and consumption cycles, and the accelerated exploration of lunar and asteroid resources. The sphere, perhaps unintentionally, provided humanity with a unifying purpose that transcended petty national and corporate interests. It showed us the potential future if we could stop fighting among ourselves and direct our collective efforts towards solving shared planetary challenges. It was a painful, yet necessary lesson. Naturally, this transition was far from smooth. It was marked by significant crises and fierce resistance from the old elites, who were desperate to cling to power derived from controlling oil and gas reserves. Nevertheless, the new vector for development had been set. Humanity, slowly and painfully, began moving down the path that the mysterious sphere's creators had perhaps walked millennia before. The discovery of the sphere plunged the religious world into a profound crisis, yet simultaneously ushered in a period of unprecedented renewal. For many conservative denominations that adhered strictly to a literal interpretation of Scripture, this was a devastating blow. The fundamental belief that humanity was created in God's image and stood as the ultimate crown of creation was irrevocably shaken. If other, far more powerful intelligent entities existed, what then was humanity's true place in the divine design? Predictably, some fundamentalist sects denounced the sphere as a creation of the devil, a temptation sent to lead the faithful astray. However, more progressive theologians viewed this discovery as an unparalleled opportunity to broaden and deepen their faith. They argued that God's majesty was not diminished, but rather amplified by the realization that he had created not just one world, but myriad worlds, and not just a single intelligent species, but countless others. The universe proved to be far more complex and diverse than described in ancient texts, which, they contended, only served to underscore the Creator's ultimate incomprehensibility. New theological branches quickly emerged, such as cosmic theology or exotheology, dedicated to integrating the knowledge of extraterrestrial life into existing religious doctrines. They grappled with profound questions. Do extraterrestrials possess souls? Does divine grace extend to them? Are they in need of salvation? These debates pulled religion out of its earth-centric constraints, forcing it to think on a truly cosmic scale. In a sense, religion returned to its primal origins, back to a time when ancient peoples gazed at the starry night sky and felt an intrinsic connection to something vast, eternal, and infinite. The sphere became the new symbol of this connection, a visible, material testament that the universe is far vaster and more mysterious than we had ever dared to imagine. Let's turn our attention back to the sphere itself and the observations surrounding it. One of the strangest and most inexplicable phenomena associated with the sphere was the occurrence of what scientists dubbed micro-eclipses. Periodically, sometimes every few weeks, the light from distant stars located precisely behind the sphere would momentarily dim by a minuscule fraction of a percent. These drops were too brief and too faint to be caused by the transit of any known celestial body. Initially, researchers dismissed them as instrumental errors or sensor glitches. But when the exact same effect was simultaneously recorded by multiple independent observatories, it became undeniable that this was a real phenomenon. So, what could possibly be causing them? One leading hypothesis suggested that something small and extremely dark was orbiting the sphere at a very tight distance, perhaps a solitary satellite or an entire swarm of them. However, calculations showed that to produce this effect, these objects would have to be only a few meters across and possess almost perfect 100% light absorption. This combination would render them virtually invisible. Another theory was far stranger. It proposed that the phenomenon wasn't caused by physical objects at all, but by fleeting, localized distortions of space-time itself. It suggested the sphere occasionally flickered, momentarily altering its gravitational properties for just a split second. This could potentially be a byproduct of its internal power source or some complex unknown operating system. A third hypothesis linked the microeclipses to a hypothetical communication network. Perhaps these were moments when the sphere exchanged information with other similar objects, and the resulting communication caused momentary gravitational disturbances. None of these theories have been proven, but the microeclipses simply added another layer to the growing list of mysteries. They were like the barely perceptible breath of a sleeping giant. The sphere was clearly not static or inert. Hidden internal processes were underway, only occasionally betraying themselves in the form of these mysterious, fleeting shadows. The launch of the Eye mission was an event of planetary significance. It was broadcast live across every country in the world. Billions of people watched, holding their breath as the colossal launch vehicle lifted off, carrying the most complex and expensive piece of hardware ever conceived into orbit. This moment became the ultimate symbol of human unity. Leaders of nations, once considered rivals, stood side by side at the launch site. In mission control, engineers from America, China, Europe, and Russia worked shoulder to shoulder. Faced with such a profound mystery, old grievances suddenly seemed petty and insignificant. The probe's journey to the sphere was expected to take about 10 years. This decade became a period of intense anticipation and preparation. Humanity used this time wisely, getting ready for the potential consequences of making contact. International institutions were established, tasked with analyzing the data streaming back from the eye and formulating recommendations for governments worldwide. New educational programs were developed, designed to prepare the populace for a completely new reality. School children began learning not just the history of their own country, but the history of the cosmos, the fundamentals of astrophysics, and the probability theory. The realization that we are merely a part of a vast and diverse cosmic community slowly began to integrate into the global consciousness. It was a slow, difficult process, yet it was absolutely essential. Humanity was growing up. We were transitioning from our planetary childhood, when we believed we were the center of the universe, to adolescence, marked by the awareness of just how immense and complex the surrounding world truly is. And this transition, this profound test of maturity, was provoked by a silent, perfect sphere hanging in the cold void at the very edge of our star system. While the Oko probe was hurtling through interplanetary space back on Earth, yet another unexpected twist unfolded. A team of cryptographers and linguists analyzing the sphere's data announced they had found a hidden signal. Crucially, it wasn't a radio transmission or any standard form of electromagnetic radiation. Instead, the signal was subtly encoded, literally imprinted into the polarization of the light reflecting off the sphere. Polarization is the direction in which a light wave vibrates. Normally, starlight is unpolarized, meaning the vibrations are chaotic, occurring in all directions. However, the light reflected by the sphere exhibited a very faint, yet highly ordered polarization that shifted over time, creating a complex, non-random sequence. It was like a form of Morse code, but instead of dots and dashes, it used the subtle rotation angles of the light waves. Deciphering this signal immediately became humanity's #1 priority. The best minds on the planet struggled with the enigma. It was quickly evident that this was far beyond simple binary code. The structure was multi-layered and recursive. It resembled a fractal. It seemed to hold an enormous volume of encoded information. This discovery sparked a renewed wave of intense debate. If the sphere was transmitting a message, why use such an impossibly complex and hidden method? Why not just use a simple, straightforward radio signal? One theory proposed that this was a kind of intelligence test. Only civilizations advanced enough to detect and decode such a subtle signal would be able to read the message. It was a mechanism designed to filter out unintelligent interlocutors. A second version was far more pragmatic. Perhaps this method of data transmission is simply the most energy efficient and noise-resistant approach on a galactic scale. It requires no powerful transmitter, and it doesn't pollute the cosmic airwaves like radio. It is a quiet, elegant whisper that can only be heard if you know exactly how to listen. Whatever the reason, humanity had received its own Rosetta Stone. Now the hardest part remained, learning to read what was written upon it. The initial deciphering results were staggering. The signal contained no words or images as we understood them. Instead, it was pure mathematics and physics. The first blocks we decoded were descriptions of fundamental physical constants, the speed of light, Planck's constant, the gravitational constant. Crucially, these were not expressed in our standard units, not meters, seconds, or kilograms. They used dimensionless ratios based on the properties of hydrogen itself, the simplest and most abundant element in the universe. This was a universal language, understandable to any scientifically aware civilization. Then came the more complex material, the equations of quantum mechanics and general relativity. But they were not the equations we knew. They were written in a more general, more elegant form that unified the quantum world and gravity, the very thing Einstein dreamed of, and what Earth's greatest physicists are still struggling to achieve. This was the long-sought theory of everything. The sphere wasn't just saying hello. It was giving us the key to understanding the deepest structure of reality. It was the most incredible gift imaginable. But with this gift came immense responsibility. This knowledge could be used for far more than just good. Technologies rooted in the theory of everything could grant humanity both inexhaustible energy and weapons of unimaginable destructive power. Humanity now faced a choice, much like the one it faced in the 1940s when the energy of the atom was first unlocked. Could we handle this new knowledge wisely this time? The answer depended not on the technology itself, but on us, on our ability to cooperate, on our ethics, on our humanity. By transmitting its knowledge, the sphere seemed to be asking a single question: are you ready to grow up? And so, after 10 long years in flight, the eye probe finally approached its target. The first close-range images confirmed everything we'd seen from Earth: a flawless, black surface, utterly devoid of any distinguishing features. The probe began its final maneuvers, settling into a stable orbit around the sphere. All systems were nominal. Billions of people on Earth, glued to their screens, held their breath. And then, at that precise moment, the unexpected happened. Just as the probe locked into its calculated path, the perfectly smooth surface of the sphere shuddered. A ripple ran across it, like a stone dropped into calm water. Then, the entire surface began to glow with a soft, ethereal blue light. And in the center of this luminous sphere, directly opposite the probe, an image appeared. It was the double helix, the DNA molecule, our DNO. The sphere knew about us. It knew who we were. It had been waiting. Following this, the DNA image dissolved and was replaced by a map of the stars. But not the sky we observe from Earth. This was a view from an entirely different point in the galaxy. One star system was highlighted on the map, and a line extended from it straight toward our own sun. This was more than just an answer. It was an invitation. The sphere was showing us where it came from, where its creators originated. It was showing us the path home. In that moment, it became clear that all of human history had simply been a prologue. The true journey was only just beginning. Humanity now had a new goal, a new dream: to reach the stars the sphere had pointed toward. This voyage might take hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. But now, we had a heading. We had hope. The silent sphere had finally spoken, and its first word changed the destiny of mankind forever. But what followed? After the initial contact, the sphere ramped up its data transmission. It stopped using subtle light polarization and switched to a direct, modulated energy beam targeted straight at the Oko probe. It was a veritable torrent of knowledge, blueprints for interstellar drives based on manipulating space-time itself, schematics for generating energy directly from the vacuum, the fundamentals of planetary terraforming, and the creation of stable, thriving biospheres. This was the complete technological foundation required for a Type 2 civilization. The sphere's creators, who we might call the gardeners or the architects, weren't just sending us an invitation, they were handing us every tool needed to make that journey ourselves. But alongside the technology, they transmitted something far deeper. Vast data archives detailing their history, their philosophy, and their art. We learned they were an ancient, virtually immortal race, originating billions of years ago. They had navigated countless stages of development, wars, crises, and evolutionary bottlenecks, ultimately achieving a state of profound harmony with themselves and the cosmos. They held no interest in conquest or colonization. Their purpose was the preservation and fostering of life in all its myriad forms. Spheres like the one we found were their primary instruments. They functioned simultaneously as observation posts, universal libraries, and universities for fledgling civilizations like ours. They located planets with emerging intelligent life and deposited such a gift nearby. They never intervened directly, allowing the civilization to develop autonomously. Only once a civilization reached a specific threshold, achieving spaceflight and successfully detecting the sphere, would the architects initiate contact and offer their assistance. It was the most humane and wise first contact strategy imaginable. The realization of this truth ushered in a period on Earth that would later be known as the Great Enlightenment. Humanity understood that it was not alone in the deepest possible sense. We weren't just coexisting with other species. We were part of a vast galactic family, watched over and cared for by older, wiser intellectual kin. This new worldview fundamentally reshaped our society. Wars vanished, rendered meaningless. National borders blurred and eventually dissolved, as we all recognize ourselves as Terrans, citizens of a single planet. The global economy shifted entirely, moving from a principle of competition to one of radical cooperation. The primary currency was no longer money, but knowledge, creativity, and contribution to the collective goal, preparing for humanity's first interstellar voyage. Naturally, this transition was neither instant nor painless. There were those who resisted change, clinging to outdated power structures and old prejudices. But the tide of history could not be stopped. Inspired by a monumental goal, humanity began to build a new world. The first orbital shipyards for constructing interstellar vessels were commissioned above Earth. Children dreamed not of becoming business moguls or soldiers, but of becoming astronauts, xenobiologists, and hyperdrive engineers. It was a time of incredible optimism and creative ferment. People worked, not out of fear or greed, but purely out of enthusiasm, driven by the desire to touch the great mystery and become part of a magnificent cosmic project. The sphere, which had been an enigma for so long, became our compass, pointing the way to the future. It was a symbol of what intelligence can achieve when guided not by egoism, but by wisdom and a profound love for life itself. So, we've come a long way. From spotting a tiny anomaly in telescope data, right up to the dawn of a new era for humanity. The perfect sphere, which at first seemed like nothing more than a physical puzzle, turned out to be something immeasurably greater. It was a key left behind for us by an ancient, wise civilization. It was a test of our maturity, one that I truly hope we were able to pass. It became the catalyst, forcing us to unite and rethink our place in the universe. The story of the sphere is really the story of how the most incredible discoveries wait for us exactly where we least expect them. It teaches us that the cosmos is neither hostile nor indifferent. It is full of wonder and perhaps full of intelligent life, ready to share its wisdom, if only we are ready to receive it. Our journey to the stars is only just beginning, and it promises to be the most thrilling adventure of all time. Thank you for spending this time with me, reflecting on this incredible story. I hope it gives you something interesting to dream about tonight. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and definitely let me know in the comments. How do you think you would feel if you found out a sphere like this truly existed? Fear, excitement, or something else entirely? Good night.